Sarah Martinez had never imagined herself crawling through mud at 3 in the morning. But here she was, pressed against the cold earth of a mountainous ridge in Afghanistan. The 24-year-old communications specialist from Texas had joined the army to pay for college, not to find herself in the middle of combat operations. Her job was supposed to be simple: maintain radio contact between units and relay information back to base command. The mission had started like any other, routine patrol. Their unit was tasked with providing overwatch for a convoy moving through a dangerous valley known for insurgent activity. Sarah's role was to stay back with the communications equipment, monitoring radio chatter and coordinates, while the more experienced soldiers took forward positions. She had her standard-issue M4 rifle, but it was more for personal protection than actual combat use. As dawn approached, Sarah huddled behind a rocky outcrop with her radio equipment, watching the convoy of armored vehicles snake through the valley below. The morning mist clung to the mountains, creating an eerie atmosphere that made visibility challenging. She could hear the quiet chatter of her fellow soldiers positioned along the ridge, their voices barely audible through her earpiece. Sergeant Williams, the squad leader, had positioned his men strategically along the ridgeline. There were 8 soldiers in total, including Sarah, spread across nearly half a mile of rocky terrain. Each had a specific sector to watch, and Sarah's position gave her a clear view of the entire valley. Her primary job was to maintain communication with the convoy and report any suspicious activity. The convoy consisted of 5 vehicles carrying supplies and personnel to a forward operating base. Intelligence reports had suggested the route was relatively secure, but in Afghanistan, nothing was ever certain. The soldiers on the ridge were there as insurance, a precautionary measure that had become standard operating procedure. As Sarah adjusted her radio frequency to check in with base command, she noticed movement in the valley that didn't belong to the convoy. Through her binoculars, she could make out several figures moving among the rocks on the opposite slope. They were too far away to identify clearly, but their movement patterns suggested they weren't friendly forces. She immediately radioed the information to Sergeant Williams, who acknowledged her report and began repositioning his men. The convoy was still several minutes away from the potential threat area, giving them time to assess the situation. Sarah's heart rate increased as she realized this might not be the routine mission she had expected. The figures in the valley had taken positions that would give them a clear shot at the convoy as it passed through a narrow section of the road. Sarah counted at least 6 individuals, all carrying what appeared to be weapons. She relayed this information up the chain of command while maintaining her watch on the developing situation. What Sarah didn't know was that her keen observation skills and quick reporting had just prevented what could have been a devastating ambush. The convoy commander, upon receiving the intelligence, had already begun implementing evasive maneuvers. But the real test of Sarah's abilities was still to come. As the morning sun climbed higher, burning off the mist, the true nature of the threat became clear. This wasn't just a small group of insurgents looking to harass a convoy. Sarah could see more movement in the valley, suggesting a much larger force was involved. Her communications equipment suddenly became the most important asset on the ridge, as she found herself coordinating between multiple units and command elements. The convoy had halted in a defensive position, waiting for the all-clear from the Overwatch team. But as Sarah continued her surveillance, she realized that the insurgents weren't just planning to attack the convoy. They were setting up positions that would allow them to eliminate the Overwatch team first, removing the eyes and ears that were protecting the mission. Her training had never prepared her for what was about to unfold, but Sarah's natural instincts and attention to detail were about to make her an unlikely hero in a situation that would test every skill she possessed. The situation deteriorated rapidly as Sarah watched through her scope. The insurgent force was larger than anyone had anticipated, and they were moving with military precision. What had initially appeared to be 6 fighters had grown to nearly 20, all taking strategic positions throughout the valley. Sarah's fingers moved quickly across her radio controls, updating command with real-time intelligence that was becoming more critical by the minute. Sergeant Williams made the decision to call for reinforcements, but the nearest available units were at least 40 minutes away. The convoy couldn't wait that long in their exposed position, and the Overwatch team was beginning to take sporadic fire from the valley below. Sarah found herself in the unique position of being the primary communications link between all the moving pieces of this increasingly complex operation. As bullets began to ping off the rocks around her position, Sarah realized that her communications equipment made her a priority target. The insurgents understood that eliminating the radio operator would blind the American forces and give them a significant tactical advantage. She made the difficult decision to move her equipment to a more protected position, crawling nearly 100 yards while maintaining radio contact. During her movement, Sarah noticed something that the other soldiers had missed. While everyone was focused on the main insurgent force in the valley, a smaller group had flanked around to the eastern slope. These fighters were positioning themselves to attack the Overwatch team from behind, a move that would trap the Americans between two forces and likely result in heavy casualties. Her warning came just in time. Sergeant Williams was able to reposition two of his men to face the new threat, but it meant weakening their primary defensive line. Sarah found herself in an impossible situation. She was the only one with a clear view of both insurgent forces, making her observations crucial to the survival of her unit, but her exposed position made her an easy target. The firefight that erupted was unlike anything Sarah had experienced in training. The sound of automatic weapons fire echoed off the mountain walls, creating a deafening cacophony that made radio communication nearly impossible. Sarah had to shout into her microphone to relay critical information, while bullets whistled overhead, and fragments of stone showered down around her. In the midst of the chaos, Sarah spotted something that chilled her blood. One of the insurgents had what appeared to be a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, and he was positioning himself to take a shot at the stalled convoy. The vehicles were sitting ducks in the narrow valley, and a successful RPG attack could kill or wound dozens of American soldiers. She immediately radioed the threat to the convoy commander, but the distance and terrain made it impossible for the vehicles to move to safety quickly enough. The soldier with the RPG was hidden behind rocks that protected him from return fire from the valley floor, and none of the Overwatch team had a clear shot at his position. Sarah realized she might be the only one who could prevent the disaster that was about to unfold. Her position on the ridge gave her a unique angle that none of the other soldiers had. Through her rifle scope, she could see the insurgent clearly as he prepared to fire. The problem was that Sarah had never taken a shot at a human target before, and the distance was far beyond what she had practiced during her basic marksmanship training. Her hands shook as she adjusted her rifle, trying to remember everything she had learned about long-distance shooting. The mathematics involved were complex. She had to account for wind, distance, elevation, and the movement of her target. One shot was all she would get before the insurgent either fired his weapon or moved to a new position. The weight of the moment pressed down on Sarah as she realized that dozens of lives hung in the balance. Her fellow soldiers in the convoy were depending on her, even though they had no idea that their fate rested with a communications specialist who had never fired her weapon in combat. The insurgent was raising the RPG to his shoulder, and Sarah knew she was out of time. Time seemed to slow as Sarah controlled her breathing, just as her drill instructor had taught her months ago during basic training. The insurgent with the RPG was now clearly visible through her scope, approximately 400 yards away across the valley. She could see his finger moving toward the trigger mechanism, and she knew that in seconds American lives would be lost. Sarah made the mental calculations quickly. The morning wind was blowing from the east at roughly 10 miles per hour. The target was slightly uphill from her position, requiring her to aim just below center mass to account for bullet drop over the distance. Her M4 rifle wasn't designed for precision shooting at this range, but it was all she had. She squeezed the trigger with steady pressure, feeling the familiar kick of the rifle against her shoulder. The shot rang out across the valley, and for a moment, Sarah couldn't tell if she had hit her target. Then she saw the insurgent stumble and fall, the RPG launcher clattering down the rocky slope unused. The immediate threat to the convoy was eliminated, but Sarah's shot had revealed her position to the enemy forces. Suddenly, multiple weapons were trained on her location, and bullets began impacting the rocks around her with increasing accuracy. She had to move again, but this time she couldn't take her communications equipment with her. Making a split-second decision, Sarah left her radio in a protected crevice where it would continue to function, then moved to a new firing position, 50 yards away. She could still hear the radio chatter, but she could no longer actively participate in the communications. Her fellow soldiers were asking for her status updates, but she was now focused entirely on providing covering fire for their positions. From her new vantage point, Sarah could see that the insurgent forces were beginning to coordinate a final assault on the American positions. They had suffered casualties from the return fire, but they still outnumbered the Overwatch team nearly 3-1. Sergeant Williams was doing his best to coordinate the defense, but his men were running low on ammunition and were spread too thin across the ridge. Sarah realized that her earlier shot had done more than just eliminate an immediate threat. The insurgents now knew that there was at least one skilled marksman among the American forces, and they were being more cautious in their movements. This gave the Overwatch team precious time to reorganize their defenses and conserve their ammunition for the most critical targets. As she scanned the valley through her scope, Sarah spotted the insurgent leader directing his men from a position behind a large boulder. He was using hand signals to coordinate the attack, and his removal would likely disrupt their organized assault. The shot would be even more difficult than her first one, as the target was partially concealed and constantly moving. Sarah waited patiently for her opportunity, knowing that patience was often more valuable than quick action in these situations. Her communications training had taught her to observe and analyze before acting, and these skills were proving invaluable in combat. After several minutes, the insurgent leader moved to a position where he was briefly exposed, giving Sarah a clear shot. Her second shot was as accurate as her first. The insurgent leader fell, and immediately the coordinated attack began to falter. Without clear leadership, the individual fighters became confused and began to withdraw to more defensive positions. This gave Sergeant Williams the opportunity he needed to regain control of the tactical situation. The firefight continued for another 20 minutes, but the initiative had clearly shifted to the American forces. Sarah continued to provide precise fire support from her position, taking careful shots only when she was certain of hitting her targets. Each shot she fired seemed to have a disproportionate effect on enemy morale, as they had no idea how many snipers they were facing. When the shooting finally stopped, Sarah found herself shaking with adrenaline and exhaustion. She had fired 8 rounds total, and according to the observations of her fellow soldiers, had eliminated at least 5 enemy fighters. For a communications specialist who had never been in combat before, it was an extraordinary performance that had likely saved multiple American lives. But the full significance of what Sarah had accomplished wouldn't become clear until after the mission was complete and the reports were filed with higher command. The aftermath of the firefight brought an eerie silence to the mountain ridge. Sarah remained in her position for another hour, providing overwatch as a recovery team secured the area and tended to wounded soldiers. 2 members of her unit had sustained minor injuries from rock fragments and ricocheting bullets, but remarkably, there were no serious casualties among the American forces. As the adrenaline began to wear off, Sarah felt the full weight of what she had done. She had taken human lives, something she had never imagined she would have to do when she enlisted. The training had prepared her for the technical aspects of combat, but nothing could have prepared her for the emotional impact of those moments when she had looked through her scope and made the decision to pull the trigger. Sergeant Williams approached her position as the immediate danger passed. He had been monitoring her performance throughout the engagement and was clearly impressed by what he had witnessed. Sarah had not only provided crucial intelligence and communication support, but had also demonstrated marksmanship skills that exceeded those of soldiers with years more combat experience. The convoy was able to complete its mission successfully, reaching the forward operating base without further incident. The supplies and personnel they were transporting were critical to ongoing operations in the region, and the successful completion of the mission had implications far beyond what any individual soldier could see from their position on the ridge. Over the next several days, word of Sarah's performance began to spread through the military chain of command. Her actions had been observed not just by her immediate unit, but by officers monitoring the operation from command centers hundreds of miles away. The precision of her shooting, combined with her tactical awareness and communication skills, had created a unique combat record that was drawing attention at the highest levels. What Sarah didn't know was that her actions had been recorded by drone surveillance footage that captured the entire engagement from overhead. Military analysts reviewing the footage were amazed by the accuracy of her shots and the tactical impact of her decisions. Her ability to identify and eliminate key targets had single-handedly changed the outcome of what could have been a devastating ambush. The formal debriefing process revealed additional details about Sarah's performance that even her fellow soldiers hadn't fully appreciated. Ballistics analysis confirmed that her shots had been made at distances and under conditions that would challenge even trained snipers. The fact that she had accomplished this with a standard infantry rifle, rather than specialized sniper equipment, made her achievement even more remarkable. Military intelligence officers were particularly interested in Sarah's ability to read the tactical situation and identify priority targets. Her communications background had given her a unique perspective on battlefield management, allowing her to see patterns and threats that traditional infantry soldiers might have missed. This combination of skills was exactly what the military needed for certain specialized operations. Within a week of the engagement, Sarah found herself summoned to meet with Colonel James Peterson, the commanding officer for the entire regional operation. Such meetings were highly unusual for enlisted personnel, especially someone of Sarah's junior rank and non-combat specialty. She had no idea why she was being called to speak with such a high-ranking officer. The meeting was scheduled to take place at the main command center, a heavily fortified compound that served as the nerve center for military operations throughout the region. Sarah had never been inside the facility before, and she was nervous about what the colonel might want to discuss with her. Her immediate superiors had given her no indication of what to expect. As Sarah prepared for the meeting, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few days. She had enlisted in the army as a young woman looking for educational opportunities and stable career prospects. She had never seen herself as a warrior or a hero, just someone doing her job to the best of her ability. Now she was being recognized for actions that had saved lives and changed the outcome of a significant military operation. The recognition felt surreal, as if it were happening to someone else. Sarah struggled to reconcile her self-image as a support soldier with the reality of what she had accomplished on that mountain ridge. The summons to meet with Colonel Peterson suggested that her actions had implications beyond what she understood. In the military, junior enlisted personnel didn't typically have direct contact with senior officers unless something significant was involved. Sarah could only wonder what the colonel wanted to discuss and how it might affect her future in the army. Colonel Peterson's office was intimidating, filled with maps, tactical displays, and commendations from decades of military service. Sarah stood at attention as the colonel reviewed her service record, occasionally glancing up at her with an expression she couldn't read. The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Finally, the colonel spoke. His voice was measured and serious, with the authority that came from years of command experience. He began by acknowledging Sarah's recent actions on the ridge, but his tone suggested this meeting was about more than just recognition for a job well done. There was something else, something that required a conversation at this level of command. The colonel explained that Sarah's performance had caught the attention of military planners at the Pentagon. Her unique combination of skills, communications expertise, tactical awareness, and demonstrated marksmanship ability made her a candidate for specialized assignments that few soldiers could handle. He was offering her the opportunity to transfer to a unit that operated differently from conventional army forces. Sarah listened carefully as the colonel outlined what this opportunity would mean. She would receive advanced training in multiple disciplines, including precision shooting, advanced communication systems, and tactical analysis. The assignments would be dangerous and often classified, but they would also give her the chance to have a direct impact on critical military operations. The colonel was careful not to make the opportunity sound like an order, but Sarah understood that this was the kind of career-defining moment that soldiers rarely encountered. Her actions on the ridge had opened a door that might never open again, and the decision she made in this office would determine the trajectory of her entire military career. What the colonel didn't immediately reveal was the specific nature of the unit he was describing. This was a special operations group that worked directly with intelligence agencies and other specialized military units. The soldiers in this unit operated in small teams, often in hostile territory, performing missions that required both technical expertise and combat effectiveness. Sarah's communications background made her valuable for operations that required coordination between multiple agencies and military units. Her proven ability to remain calm under pressure and make accurate assessments of tactical situations were skills that couldn't be easily taught. The marksmanship ability she had demonstrated was simply the final piece of a skill set that was rare in the military. As the colonel continued his explanation, Sarah began to understand the magnitude of what was being offered to her. This wasn't just a promotion or a transfer to a different unit. This was an invitation to join an elite group of soldiers who operated at the highest levels of military operations. The training alone would take months and would challenge her in ways she couldn't imagine. The colonel also explained the personal costs that would come with accepting this opportunity. The training would be physically and mentally demanding, with a high dropout rate even among experienced soldiers. The assignments would often require long deployments in dangerous locations, with little contact with family and friends. The work itself would be classified, meaning she would never be able to discuss most of what she did with anyone outside the unit. Sarah asked for time to consider the offer, and the colonel granted her request. She had 72 hours to make a decision that would change her life completely. The colonel emphasized that there would be no negative consequences if she chose to remain in her current assignment, but opportunities like this were extremely rare and might never come again. As Sarah left the colonel's office, her mind was spinning with the implications of what she had just heard. 3 days earlier, she had been a communications specialist whose biggest concern was maintaining radio contact during routine patrols. Now she was being offered the chance to join one of the most elite units in the entire military. She spent the next 2 days talking with trusted mentors and thinking through the decision. Her family back in Texas would worry about her if she took on more dangerous assignments, but they would also be proud of the recognition she was receiving. Her fellow soldiers encouraged her to take the opportunity, recognizing that it was a chance to serve at the highest levels of the military. On the final day before her deadline, Sarah realized that the decision had already been made. Her actions on the ridge had revealed something about herself that she hadn't known before. She had the ability to perform under extreme pressure and make decisions that could save lives. The question wasn't whether she should accept the colonel's offer, but whether she could live with herself if she turned it down. Sarah returned to Colonel Peterson's office exactly 72 hours after their initial meeting. This time, she walked in with confidence and purpose, having made peace with her decision. When the colonel asked for her answer, Sarah accepted the assignment without hesitation. Her voice was steady as she committed to the training program and the specialized unit that would become her new military family. The colonel smiled for the first time during their interactions, clearly pleased with her decision. He explained that her training would begin immediately, starting with a transfer to a classified facility in the United States, where she would spend the next 6 months developing her skills. The program would be intense, designed to push her beyond limits she didn't know she had, but the colonel expressed confidence that she would succeed. Within a week, Sarah found herself at a military installation that didn't appear on any public maps. The other trainees in her class were all experienced soldiers from various branches of the military, each selected for specific skills that made them valuable to special operations. Sarah was the only communication specialist in the group, and initially she felt out of place among infantry soldiers, pilots, and intelligence specialists. The training was everything the colonel had promised and more. Sarah's days began before dawn and ended well after sunset, filled with physical conditioning, advanced marksmanship training, tactical exercises, and classroom instruction in subjects she had never encountered before. The dropout rate was high, with several trainees eliminated each week for various reasons, ranging from injuries to inability to meet performance standards. What surprised Sarah most was how her communications background gave her advantages that pure combat soldiers didn't have. Her training in systems analysis and information management translated well to tactical planning and mission coordination. She could see connections between different elements of complex operations that others missed, making her valuable as both a team member and a leader. Her marksmanship skills, which had first been noticed on the ridge in Afghanistan, continued to develop under expert instruction. The specialized training revealed that she had natural abilities that could be refined into truly exceptional capabilities. By the end of the program, Sarah was consistently hitting targets at distances that impressed even veteran snipers. The transformation from communication specialist to special operations soldier was complete when Sarah graduated from the training program at the top of her class. The young woman from Texas who had joined the Army to pay for college had become one of the most capable soldiers in one of the military's most elite units. Her first assignment with the Special Operations Unit took her back to Afghanistan, but in a very different capacity than her original deployment. Now she was part of a small team conducting high-priority missions that directly supported national security objectives. The work was dangerous and demanding, but Sarah thrived in an environment where her unique skills were fully utilized. Years later, Sarah would reflect on how a single moment of decision on a mountain ridge had changed the entire trajectory of her life. The shot that eliminated the insurgent with the RPG launcher had revealed capabilities she didn't know she possessed and opened doors to opportunities she never could have imagined. Her military career continued to flourish as she took on increasingly responsible positions within the special operations community. She eventually became an instructor herself, training the next generation of soldiers who would face similar moments of decision in combat zones around the world. Her story became legendary within certain military circles, used as an example of how individual initiative and skill could have far-reaching impacts. The question that General Morrison had asked during her final evaluation for promotion to Sergeant Major still echoed in her mind. Who took that shot? It was a question that acknowledged not just the technical skill required for the shot itself, but the courage and judgment required to take it when lives hung in the balance. Sarah's answer had been simple. "I did what needed to be done, sir." But the implications of that moment continued to resonate throughout her career and the careers of the soldiers she trained. Her story proved that heroism could emerge from unexpected places, and that support personnel could become combat leaders when circumstances demanded it. The communications specialist who had once crawled through mud on a mountain ridge had become one of the most respected soldiers in the entire military, proving that sometimes the most important shots are taken not by designated marksmen, but by soldiers who simply refuse to let their fellow Americans down when it matters most.